Hello everyone, welcome to the channel. If you like what you hear and see, please hit the like button, subscribe, tell your friends. I'm trying to grow the channel. So today, as you could probably tell from some of my videos, thanks in large part to the vehicle I drive, I spend quite a bit of time at the gas station. So I'm old enough to remember, being 60 years old, a time where gas stations were largely just that. Actually, at one time, we called them service stations, and mostly because you could get your car serviced there. You could get your oil changed. They often did even more extensive work, transmissions, things like that. That's all changed. Now, gas stations are largely just convenience stores slash restaurants with pumps attached. And it always boggles my mind that, I think that came about pretty much in the early 90s. So let's talk about the history for a little bit. In the early 90s, particularly in rural America, and I've traveled quite a bit by car, and have seen the transformation of rural America. I grew up in the country, and I've spent quite a bit of time out in the country, in spite of my Yankee accent. You saw a transformation of rural America away from Main Street. It started in the 90s, of course. It's all but complete today. You saw at one time on Main Street, and it included the small town I grew up in. We had a guy who had a general store, and he owned a market next door. They were two separate businesses, kind of under the same roof. But he had a little, it was called Sure Fine, but it's akin to the old IGAs or A&Ps, small grocery store, and he sold everything, of course. It's not like convenience stores today. He sold produce, of course, dairy, and everything. You could just go there and do your weekly or bi-weekly grocery shopping, whatever the case may be. And his prices, frankly, it's not that we didn't have supermarkets. You had to drive to the next town over, which was about 12 miles maybe one way, so about 24 miles round trip. So by the time you factored in the gas, and remember when I was a kid, gas was expensive. There were shortages. There was the Arab oil embargo. Inflation was what it is today. It was running rampant. The difference between that period and this period was wages were keeping up with inflation. My dad worked two jobs. And sometimes actually more, depending on what he was doing. But he had a steady job, and he also had a side gig, and he supported our family. And my mom didn't go to work until I was about 12 years old. And at that point, I was responsible, as many Gen X kids, for letting myself and my little brother into the house, fixing us something to eat, because she worked in the next major city. And so her commute was about 30 miles one way, so 60 miles round trip. So she got home later in the evening. So I was responsible for making sure we did our homework, making sure that I cooked meals. And she would do some food prep for us or have some stuff for during the week. But oftentimes my brother and I would just make sandwiches, or sometimes silly shit like dressing sandwiches when the groceries were running low. And my dad worked evenings, so he worked what most places called third shift, and so he was not home in the evenings. He was working and didn't get home until almost midnight. At any rate, getting back to growing up, so in my small town, there was this grocer and slash general store, and you pretty much could buy whatever. I mean, in the general store, he had jeans, he had sneakers, he had all kinds of stuff in there, and of course, household goods, domestics, and so on. And it wasn't until much later, actually, I would say mid-90s. Early to mid-90s, where things started to move to my little town, including a supermarket. We got a supermarket, and it was a regional chain. The prices weren't really fundamentally better. They were a little bit cheaper, but the quality of the stuff was on par pretty much to the little market we had, the little Sure Fine. And at the end of the day, that was the precursor. Then, we got some more national chains. The McDonald's opened up, and all kinds of national chains moved in. Well, he closed up his little market, of course, because he could not compete with the supermarket. And for those of you who remember, the 80s is when Walmart proliferated throughout the country. And it started in rural America. I mean, pretty much now Walmart is in every U.S. market, and of course in Mexico and Canada as well. But at that time, the Walmarts were predominantly in rural areas, and there weren't a lot of the super Walmarts that you have now with the grocery slash department store associated with it, or discount store. That didn't exist at the time. They were just rolling it out. There were very few examples, actually. And they were usually in the larger rural centers, what you would call larger towns or even smaller cities. And they started rolling those out throughout the country. And that was really put the final nail in the coffin of these mom and pops on Main Street. And of course, in the 70s, we used to go to a little local movie theater, and the guy it was basically on Main Street in the village that was not too far from my little hometown. We'd go there and see movies. Well, he had to close up because he couldn't compete with the large metro movieplexes, the AMCs and so on. There were actually a couple at the time. It wasn't just AMC. He couldn't compete. The little merchants on Main Street couldn't compete with there were shoe stores on Main Street. There were hardware stores. All those guys couldn't compete with the Home Depots and the Lowe's. This is all stuff you've heard before. But getting back to my original premise about gas stations, this is right around the time where gas stations started to really grow their convenience component, where it was just more than going in there, maybe grabbing a soda, and some of them had maybe some candy or something. Those convenience stores really didn't exist at gas stations. This is the time that they just exploded everywhere. And of course, everything is much more money in there. Their margins, I imagine, are slimmer. But now it's to the point where, every Cumberland Farms, every Sheetz, every, Quick Trip, every Circle K, they become restaurants. They sometimes have fast food restaurants associated with them. Sometimes they grew out of, like Royal Farms, they grew out of the actual food business itself. And if you've lived in rural America, you know that oftentimes the guy who sold the oil and the propane was one of the local farmers. That was his side business, that in many cases became his business, or his main business. So, this explosion. So as I said, I spend a lot of time at the gas station. So I go there, and you can get everything from a meal, pizza, chicken, you name it, subs, of course, ice cream. There's all kinds of things. Some of them have Dairy Queens, KFCs, Pizza Huts, Taco Bells, all sorts of different things, their own brands. 7-Eleven, of course, was another one that was kind of, laid the groundwork for this. There were 7-Elevens everywhere. Oftentimes they sold gas, and they had the convenience part that was 7-Eleven's business, or I don't know if it's still Southland Industries or Southland Enterprises. But that was their primary business. And then now they're pretty much ubiquitous. You see them everywhere. So I think this is one of the things that's both, yes, it's convenience. If you happen to be on a road trip or late at night and you just need to run and grab some milk and maybe get some gas. But at the end of the day, what have we paid for that? We've, killed our mom and pop businesses, the businesses that very often were families right in our towns. And I say it's a shame, because that that's something that will never come back. My business, one of the things that's often talked about is resurrecting the downtowns. And when they do come back, it's usually not with shops, and it's usually with things like art galleries, things that cater to the more well-to-do, not just the average person. So it's usually art galleries and microbrews and upscale restaurants and very rarely or tap rooms. It's very rarely is it something that actually caters to the local population or that provides goods and services that sort of cater to the lower or working class person or even middle class person these days. So anyway, I lament this. I know some of you do too. Please let me know your thoughts in the comments. Anyway, I will see you down the road, hopefully not at the gas station, but down the road of life. We're spending far too much time at the gas station these days, and at these prices, it's just bankrupting people. I will see you down the road. Thank you, and again, please like and subscribe. Thank you.